Hello, students, and welcome to week 6 in your compressed developmental writing class. This is Professor Wood coming at you this week. It is the week before spring break. That is very exciting. You are now almost at the halfway point to the course, so hopefully you have learned a lot in working in this course as we have gone through. This week is a big week. You've got a lot to do and a lot of practice and a lot of time to really think about some things as far as what you're going to write your first major essay on. And we will move forward from there. I will record a video for week 7, but I'll be doing that while you are on spring break. So just FYI on that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so we can go ahead and talk about what we are going to be doing. So if we go into content, I'm going to go to week 6, and it should still be up because I was just beginning to work with week 6. You can see that week 6 has a lot of things. I believe there's 14 things listed. That's a lot. It seems like a lot, but it's really not. I'm going to go over the thesis statement PowerPoint and developing a thesis statement. I'm going to go over what an argument essay is. I'm going to talk about clarity and cohesion. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the argument essay task is. And some topics for you to possibly peruse. I know some students like to be told what to write about, and other students like to have autonomy and choice in what they want to write about. Then I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about some things that can help you organize your writing as you begin to start developing the essay. I've got a couple of graphic organizers. I've got some videos for you to watch, which I'm not going to go through and show you while I'm talking, but you can just click on the video and watch. And then I've got a couple of ads for you to look at as well and respond to on the discussion board on which one you thought was the most effective and why. And remember, with discussion boards, you have to create a discussion, and then you have to respond to at least one of your peers in order to get full credit. So that's week 6 in a nutshell, just a small sort of overview of what we're going to do. And so I'm going to get right to it, and I'm going to talk to you first about the thesis statement, and gonna have to start from the beginning, and what the almighty thesis statement is. Now, this is a brief overview, but I do think it's important that you are aware of what a thesis statement is, because it is a map for your reader. It gives your reader a guideline on where you're going to go in your paper without announcing where you're going to go in your paper. So just to sort of go over what a thesis statement actually is defined, it's a sentence, one sentence that clearly and concisely indicates the subject of your paper, the main points that you're going to cover, and the order in which you will discuss them. It is not the subject itself. It is an interpretation of the subject. And that's really where a lot of students get stuck. And it's really important that you understand that it's an interpretation of the subject. Because you are writing an argumentative essay for this course, it is imperative and critical that you understand that it is an interpretation. Not everybody will see things the same way that you will see them, because we all have different upbringings, we all have different outlooks on life. And so there are unique ways that we look at different argumentative topics and different controversial topics. So important notes for you to know about a thesis statement: it's a declarative statement. It is not a question. It is not a title. It is not a fragment. So you can start sometimes with a question. And in my 1101 class, what I tell students is most definitely start with a research question and then develop it into a statement. But this is just one example. Why are biofeedback techniques excellent methods of stress reduction? Now, I don't recommend you ever start a thesis statement with the word because. However, in some cases, it is okay. So in this particular case, the thesis statement is, because of its simplicity, accuracy, and lack of toxicity, biofeedback is often a successful technique for migraine relief. Okay, so it does tell me the 3 points. It identifies that so it could be reworded to be more clear, which is also one of the things that you'll be practicing this week. But certainly it tells me that it's simple, it's accurate, and it lacks toxins. And so those are the 3 areas that were going to be covered in the argumentative paper. And biofeedback is the topic. So it is a declarative statement. It declares something. It absolutely tells the reader exactly what they're going to be reading about without saying, this is what my paper is going to be about. So a thesis statement, especially in an argumentative essay, is an arguable idea. It's not a fact, because if you use facts, facts can't be debated. Fact, Cortez conquered Mexico in 1509. That's a fact. That cannot be debated. That is historically documented fact. However, you could say, thesis statement wise, the colonial mentality which prompted Cortez's barbaric invasion of Mexico brought about not an advance of Native society, but a destruction of Aztec culture. This is a debatable, defensible thesis statement. It also tells the reader exactly what you're going to talk about. So notice the difference. You can argue that there's a colonial mentality, which is the result of Cortez's barbaric invasion of Mexico. You can also say that as a result of it, it didn't advance society, but destroyed it. That is an arguable, defensible thesis statement. So that's really important. Also, looking at thesis statements, it's not an announcement of your purpose. And I've seen this in the many years that I've taught this course, and I've also seen this in the many years that I've been teaching, is some people still, no matter what, always do this. In this paper, I will discuss the causes and effects of the French Revolution and then argue as to whether or not it was successful. That would not get a thesis point. That would not pass muster on a rubric. That would not work at all. However, if you look at the revised thesis statement for clarity and cohesion, you'll see that though the reasons for the French revolutions were noble, liberty, fraternity, and equality, the effects were devastating, ultimately leading to the unsuccessful reinstitution of the monarchy and the restructuring of a classist society into a militaristic one. That thesis statement is defensible. So a thesis statement is not always obvious. So an obvious statement, again, fact, litter creates pollution of the environment. That's a fact. We know this. This is documented through research. So you need to revise that for clarity and cohesion. Recycling programs, though expensive at first, are ultimately an efficient, cost-effective, and environmentally sound means of reducing waste in our environment. Okay, again, a fact. The computer was an important technological advancement in the 20th century. I would say that's pretty much fact, yes. However, you need to revise it for clarity and cohesion, and also so that it's not just simply stating fact. And I know it seems like I am repeating myself, but it's really, really important that you understand that you cannot just state facts. There has to be more depth to it. So even though computers have their idiosyncrasies, they have improved our lives tremendously by simplifying word processing, streamlining data storage, and promoting an international exchange of information. Again, you have 3 points there that you're going to cover in the paper. However, there's personal pronouns in there, so it would need to be revised for clarity and cohesion. Again, looking at thesis statement, it's specific and narrowed, and it's not a broad overgeneralization. So broad would be men are chauvinists. That's a very broad statement. So you would have to say something along the lines of men who repress their true feelings leave themselves open to physical, psychological, and relationship difficulties. Okay. A thesis statement also focuses the essay and guides its direction. So Martin Luther King Jr. is a role model for everyone to follow. That is unfocused. It doesn't have three major points in it. So again, this thesis statement starts with the word because. Because of his determination, his courage to follow his beliefs, and his unwavering sense of justice, Martin Luther King Jr. is a symbol of American freedom. You have the 3 points. You have his determination, you have his courage to follow his beliefs, and you have his unwavering sense of justice. Those would be the 3 points that I would focus on in the essay, and it guides the direction like a map. That's what I always tell my students, is that thesis statements are like maps for the reader. They give the reader an idea of where the paper is going to go. Now, typically when you're looking at argumentative essays, you are most definitely looking at you're looking at whether or not it has 3 major points in it. So the best way that I tell students is to make sure it has 3 components. And this is an acronym that helps me write papers. When I'm writing papers, it's topic, attitude, and development. So you need to have a narrowed, limited subject of your paper. You also need to have your attitude, how you will treat and interpret the subject, so that your interpretation, without saying this is my interpretation, and then your development, what areas you're going to cover in the paper without saying this is what I'm going to cover. So if you're writing a, for example, if you were writing a paper to convince your parents to let you have your own car, your thesis would not be, it's important for me to have a car. It doesn't have any reasons in there. It absolutely has no substance, no depth. So you need to say something like, it is important to have a car so that I can take road trips. Again, there's still no depth to it. It needs a little bit more development, but it does have the why in there. And having the why in there is extremely important. So how about something along these lines? Having my own car will give me more freedom to explore life, but it will also provide discipline through the expansion of my household responsibilities. Or you could look at, these are literary thesis statements. Again, I specialize in literature, so I have several literary thesis statements. So I always try to include at least one so you can see what a solid literary thesis statement looks like. This is threefold. You see the very beginning of the thesis statement. Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn is a great American novel. Sure, that is most certainly debatable. However, revised a little bit, you see in Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain develops a contrast between life on the river and life on the shore. All right, so that's a little bit more focused, but it still needs more. So this third one, through its contrasting river and shore scenes, Twain's Huckleberry Finn suggests that to find the true expression of American democratic ideals, one must leave civilized society and go back to nature. So that has a little bit more focused area in it. Okay, so let's look at this one. Where's the thesis? Contrary to popular parental and librarian opinion, quiet study time does not in fact enhance, but instead impairs students' productivity. Listening to music while studying is in fact a beneficial activity to add to a study regime for better grades because of the way music motivates students and keeps them alert. So where is the thesis statement? Well, that'll be found in your next slide, but just take a moment and try to think about where you think the thesis statement is. Okay, so now that you've had a couple of moments to really look at that and see, the thesis statement is listening to music while studying is in fact a beneficial activity to add to a study regime for better grades because of the way music motivates students and keeps them alert. Now, while this is not a perfect thesis statement, in fact, I would actually err on the side of caution with this because it is a very wordy thesis statement. It is still a thesis statement. It does explain what is going to be discussed. It is defensible because it has reasons. It has because the way music motivates students, because the way music keeps them alert, and why it's beneficial to add to a study regime. So you do have that information in your thesis statement. So your thesis has to take a stand. It has to be specific and engaging, enough to justify writing about. There are so many topics out there that people debate on. My current platform that I am discussing all the time is banned books. I don't think books should be banned, but I am an English teacher. And I think that people should be able to read about populations that have been traditionally marginalized. However, a lot of people think that certain books and book titles should not be accessible to children or teenagers of a certain age. Now, I see their opinion. However, I do not agree with it. And I have my own reasons for doing that. So if I were going to write a paper, I would explain the reasons why I feel that taking away books inhibits critical thinking skills of students, as well as does not give them exposure to current issues happening in society, because books and literature reflect what is happening in society. So I would take a stand that banning books is not okay if I were going to write a argumentative paper. Your sample argumentative paper that you'll see when we return from spring break will be on banned books, and it will have some really good information in it. Now, a strong thesis will contain words such as because, since, so, although, unless, through, and however. Why do they contain these words? Because they help with development, especially when you're looking at argumentative thesis statements. So, for example, because half of all crack babies are likely to grow up in homes lacking good mental and emotional stimulation, the federal government should finance programs to supplement parental care for crack-addicted infants and children. Now, that is a debatable thesis statement. It's defensible. It has some statistics and some information in there without adding in the numbers. And it kind of straddles the line of being a fallacy, simply because it is making an overgeneralization. Not all crack babies are likely to grow up in homes lacking good mental and emotional stimulation, but it is still defensible. So that's really, really important. So I'm going to continue talking to you a little bit about, here's another one. Hunger persists in Appalachia because jobs are scarce and farming in the infertile soil is rarely profitable. So again, the topic is hunger in Appalachia. The attitude is that it persists. And the development is that jobs are scarce and farming in infertile soil is rarely profitable. That is a thesis statement. It's defensible, it's debatable, and it does have a lot of information in there for you to discuss in your paper without saying, this is what I'm going to talk about. So the topic needs to be triple S. And that's really what I try to tell students. It needs to be single. Make sure it's narrowed. Don't try to take on too much. Make sure it's significant. Why write about it if it's not important? And make sure it's supportable. Is there enough evidence to support and defend your thesis statement? That really is the big deal. When we come back in week 7, I'm going to show you how to use the library to look for sources and everything else. But it's really important that you have this triple S, single, significant, supportable. And you have your topic, your attitude, and your development. So if you have the TAD and triple S, you have a winning thesis statement. So these are what a strong thesis statement contains. It's specific. It has to concentrate on a specific area of a general topic. As you may recall, the creation of a thesis statement begins when you choose a broad subject and then narrow down its parts until you pinpoint that specific aspect of that topic. For example, healthcare is a broad topic, but a proper thesis statement would focus on a specific area of that topic, such as options for individuals without health coverage. Precision, a strong thesis statement must be precise enough to allow for a coherent argument and remain focused on the topic, because a lot of students have what I like to call squirrel moments. They will start with a beautiful thesis statement and they'll start writing and they'll start writing and they'll write some more. And then the next thing you know, the squirrel runs across the page and they've gone completely off topic. So you want to make sure it's precise, because if it's precise, then it gives you a map as to where the rest of your paper is going to go. Also, it needs to be defensible. You have to be able to argue it because it's an argumentative essay. That's very, very important. It has to be relevant. It has to be specific. It has to be argued. And it has to be a point of view that can be defended. You have to demonstrate it. For any claim that you make in your thesis, you have to be able to provide good reasons and examples for your opinion. So that's where the secondary sources would come in. You can certainly rely on personal observations in order to do this, but there's also outside secondary sources to demonstrate this is why it's valid. Now, because it's an argument essay, it's very important that you acknowledge that there's opposition. For example, when I was just talking about banned books a little while ago, I was talking specifically about how some people feel that banning certain titles and keeping them from people of different ages is very important, because they feel that these novels are exposing children to adult themes and their children. So making sure that you acknowledge that there's opposition is very important. If you do not acknowledge that there's opposition, then you will not have a claim that is valid. Also, it has to be forceful. And I know for some of you, especially those of you that are a little apprehensive or a little scared about writing, I recommend finding something you are so passionate about that just gets you fired up. And no matter what, it makes you want to argue about. Some people, the argument could be as simple as Coke versus Pepsi. For some people, it could be arguing that school lunches are good and school lunches are bad. For others, it could be arguing daycare costs are skyrocketing and people can no longer afford to pay the cost. And there's no reason for that. There should be a government subsidy for daycare, something along those lines. It has to be something that you are passionate about. And confidence. In addition to having that forcefulness, you have to have that confidence. Phrases such as I feel or I believe actually weaken the reader's sense of confidence, because it implies that you're the only person that feels that way. So your stance has to be sufficient. It has to have sufficient backing. You have to be authoritative and knowledgeable on the matter. So for example, I have family members who are adamant that Miracle Whip is better than real mayonnaise. And they are absolutely adamant. They will argue and fuss and everything else, because they are very staunch in their opinion that Miracle Whip is better than mayonnaise. Now, will you be able to find sources for that? Probably not. Is it trivial? Absolutely. However, it is something that could be made into a defensible thesis statement. And argued. So there's that to think about. So these are all the major qualities for strong thesis statements. And I just want to show you some solid example thesis statements from previous student papers. They all have specificity, they all have precision, they're all able to be argued, they can be demonstrated, they have that forcefulness, and they have that confidence. So the first one is, number one, closing all American borders for a period of 5 years is one solution that will tackle illegal immigration. Now, do I agree with that? Not necessarily, but this is a previous thesis statement that I've seen in a student's paper. It is forceful, it can be demonstrated, it's confident, it's specific, and it's precise. So it meets all of those criteria. Number 2, compared to an absolute divorce, no-fault divorce is less expensive, promotes fair settlements, and reflects a more realistic view of the causes for marital breakdown. Again, it has 3 points that will be covered in the body of the essay. It's forceful, it's precise, it's specific, and it can be demonstrated through research. Number 3, exposing children from an early age to the dangers of drug abuse is a sure method of preventing future drug addicts. Now, this doesn't have in the thesis statement areas of what will be in the body paragraphs, but it is still a defensible thesis statement and can be backed up with research. Furthermore, number 3 is a little more sophisticated, and since this is a developmental writing class, I recommend always putting the areas that you're going to discuss in your thesis statement. But I wanted you to see what a well-developed, arguable thesis statement looked like that didn't necessarily have the points for the body paragraph in it. Number 4, again, is very much like number 3. It's a little more sophisticated, but it does has specificity. It does have precision. It can be argued. It can be demonstrated. It's forceful, and it's very confident. So number 4 is, in today's crumbling job market, a high school diploma is not significant enough education to land a stable, lucrative job. Now, at that point, this is a thesis statement. It would go at the end of an introductory paragraph, and then you would then begin to explain why. You would answer the question why a high school diploma is not significant enough education to land a stable and lucrative, which means well-paying job. So these are just some examples of solid thesis statements, and really there to help you as you begin to develop a thesis statement, which isn't coming for a couple of weeks, but I want you just to sort of see and understand what a good solid thesis statement, to give you time to practice and rehearse sort of what you're maybe going to think about writing about, because when we return from spring break, you will have to have a topic and a thesis statement developed. So remember, it has to be TAD, remember the triple S, and it has to be defensible. It has to be argumentative. So these are some weak thesis statements. I just wanted you to also see what weak thesis statements look like. It's weak when it's simply just a declaration of your subject or a description of what you will discuss in your essay. These are the ones that drive me absolutely bonkers. My paper will explain why imagination is more important than knowledge. Okay. That is slightly unreasonable. It's also outrageous, and it kind of insults the opposing side. So that makes it weak. Another one is, religious radicals across America are trying to legislate their puritanical beliefs by banning required high school books. Again, I've spoken about this in this very video and talked about it, but it's still weak because it's got an obvious fact that no one can disagree with, or it provides a dead end. It has to have a little more depth to it. It doesn't have enough depth. So that particular one, again, is attacking a group of people. And you don't want to attack people. You want to argue with them. To be able to argue effectively is a skill that takes time and energy. And I tell my students all the time, by the time you leave my course, you should be able to effectively argue anything with anyone in a way that you can't lose. Very important. A weak thesis statement here, advertising companies use sex to sell their products. That's pretty broad. There needs to be more information in there. Another one, the life of Abraham Lincoln was long and challenging. Okay, yeah. I would say his life wasn't long. I'd say his life was shortened, but it also doesn't have enough information in there to be defensible, debatable, precise. It doesn't have enough forcefulness. It's weak. So you want to make sure your thesis statement does not look like this. This is an example. These are examples of what not to do. So you Well, then after you develop a preliminary, or what I like to call the rough thesis statement, you're going to edit it. You're going to look at it for content. You're going to look at it for word choice. You're going to look at it for precision, and you're going to look at it for mechanics. Again, I can't say this enough. You have to make sure it's defensible. There needs to be clarity, cohesion, and a defensible statement in your thesis. One of the pro tips that I can give you is you can find thesis statements in many places, in the news, in the opinions of your friends, coworkers, teachers, and even in songs you hear on the radio. Become aware of thesis statements in everyday life by paying attention to people's opinions and their reasons for these opinions. Pay attention to your own everyday thesis statements as well, because they can become materials for future essays. It is important to recognize that the thesis statement is a map for your reader. It's used to guide the reader on the direction that your paper is going in. And if you take all of these tips, then you should be able to develop a solid, cohesive, clear, authoritative thesis statement. So with that being said, I'll move into clarity and cohesion, which is the next thing that we're talking about. And the best way that I can tell you clarity and cohesion makes it clear and easy to understand. And cohesion means it sticks together. So some rules to remember with clarity and cohesion, and you have readings about this in your textbook this week, is at the sentence level, the words you have to use must be precise and precisely appropriate for the audience you have chosen. Remember, if something is too wordy, it complicates matters. I like to say students fluff. A lot of times we're like, oh, I'm going to use all these big words. I'm going to use a thesaurus. We can tell. We know. As teachers, as professors, as people that read writing on a daily basis, we know when someone has used a thesaurus. We also know when someone has used a generator to help them write. We're pretty sharp when it comes to that stuff. Instead of explaining yourself, you want to select your words thoughtfully, precisely, and carefully. Make sure that your punctuation is correct and that you emphasize the ideas that you want your audience to focus on. When in doubt, just hold to the simple math. A subject plus a verb equals a sentence. Now that's at the sentence level, but at the paragraph level, clarity and cohesion are achieved when you follow the math of the paragraph. You need a topic sentence plus your evidence equals the paragraph. Just as the thesis statement functions as an umbrella over the whole essay, consider the topic sentence as an umbrella over the individual paragraph. And I have a graphic organizer for that for you. And I will put that, make sure that that's, and I'll show you what it looks like. And I'll put that underneath content for this week as well. So as you begin to develop and write your essay, I know a lot of you like to work ahead. At the essay level, the pattern is the same. Clarity is achieved by holding to the simplicity of the mathematical equations, and cohesion comes when the thesis statement serves as an overarching umbrella, and it holds all the key ideas and evidence together. Few writers achieve clarity and cohesion in a first draft. Do not expect perfection the first time you write. That's why revision is important. When you first sit down to write, allow yourself to just write. When you sit down to revise, that's when you'll apply your simple math of your sentence, your paragraph, and your essay. You always have to keep your purpose, voice, and audience at the forefront and ask yourself, so what or why? Why is this important? And again, these are common errors. Students over-explain, students overthink, and students under-edit. So if you over-explain, oftentimes when you state your purpose once and then restate it again for clarity and then restate it a third way to make sure your readers understand. But what ends up happening is you over-explain it and we get lost as readers when there's constant repetition. If you read an author's ideas once but still have questions, the best way to have those questions answered is to have evidence that is offered in support rather than a continued restatement of the claim. You can't say over and over again, Edgar Allan Poe is the best author in the world. Edgar Allan Poe is the best author in the world. Edgar Allan Poe is the best author in the world. I don't have reasons for that. I don't have emphasis. I don't have citations. I don't have secondary sources to prove that. So you don't want to over-explain something It's all too common on the internet. It's all too common in the published world. So if you find yourself irritated by the length of someone's communication, ask yourself whether it's an issue of over-explaining. And then overthinking. Overthinking, it's kind of a sister error to over-explaining. It happens when you're not confident. You don't feel that your ideas are solid or that your evidence is adequate. So instead of presenting what you have with authority, you really wonder about other approaches you could have, should have, would have, because you're insecure and find yourself kind of going off on a tangent. That's sort of the squirrel moment that I was talking about earlier in the video. When you revise, you want to look for over-explaining and overthinking, because it takes away from your meaning and you lose the audience. And then under editing, because revision is such a critical stage of the writing process, too often writers neglect to edit their work with a keen eye towards clarity and cohesion. When you edit, you want to watch for the extraneous, the extra stuff, punctuation, phrases, paragraphs, ideas. Ask yourself, would my paper be weaker or stronger if I take this out? And that's really all clarity and cohesion are. Now, your grammar assignment this week is I've given you 20 sentences, and I want you to take those 20 sentences and I want you to turn them into a clear, cohesive paragraph. You'll have to edit, you'll have to explain, you'll have to add some punctuation there. And it really is good practice in learning how to write clearly. So that's what your grammar practice is this week. Now, the next thing I'll go to is the argument essay itself. And I'm just going to download the PowerPoint here, which is probably exactly what you guys will do, and talk to you about exactly what I'm asking you to do. Again, we're just in the beginning stages, but you have to know what an argument is. You have to understand that an argument it has a different meaning. It means to make something clear. So again, we've talked about it. What's your position? How do you make your position known? You're going to use argumentative or persuasive writing. So you want to stick to your purpose. You want to make sure that it's credible. That's important. And again, you have to be specific. And all these things I just talked about when writing a thesis statement. But topic, should there be a national minimum wage? Is this a narrow focus that you could discuss in a 2-page paper? Absolutely. Is your purpose clear? Absolutely. If it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're writing to a state senator to rally for a national minimum wage, then absolutely. But who's your audience? You have to think about those things. So audience matters. I'm your audience at this point because I'll be the only one reading your papers. So if you change your audience from a minimum wage increase in Florida to a group of conservative elderly individuals who have already voiced their opposition, if you change it and you go with a bunch of teenagers with their first summer jobs, it will really change things, because you have to know your audience in order to argue your point. Even if you present an effective argument, you will not always change everyone's mind. That's just the way it is. I always tell the story to my students about my very first argumentative essay. I like to challenge myself when I write argumentative essays. And so my very first one that I wrote in college, I actually wrote about the benefits of homeschooling. Now, when I was in undergraduate school, this is long before the pandemic and everything else, my husband was homeschooled, and he is the smartest man I know. And so one of the things that I felt was that it was as a result of his homeschooling. So I did research on what homeschooling was, because I was a product of the public school system and I had never even heard of homeschooling, which now it's common. But when I was younger, I didn't even know what it was. And so I felt that I could do a solid research paper on the benefits of homeschooling. And so I did. And I wrote a paper about how homeschooling is a viable option for people that have children that have illnesses, or people that have that travel all over the place with their jobs and things like that. And I wrote an effective argumentative essay on the benefits of homeschooling. My professor absolutely did not agree with my paper. He did not agree that homeschooling was beneficial for children. He felt that homeschooling was a bad idea. Now, mind you, this was in 1997, so it was a long time ago. However, when I got the paper back, he said to me, he said, Rachel, he said, I do not agree with what you said. I do not agree with your opinion. However, you've argued it effectively. And that's the important thing to remember. Whether you're attempting to convince someone to change their mind, that's okay if they don't change their mind, as long as you have an effectively developed argument. You have to consider the audience, but you also need to remember that you won't always convince the audience. So, and I didn't convince him, but he felt that I argued effectively. And so I will remember that for the rest of my life. And I think that's really important. Again, we talked about thesis and supporting your claims. So talking about these three terms is very important. This is what's known as the rhetorical triangle. And you have logos, pathos, and ethos. So these appeals are very, very important. When you're looking at the rhetorical triangle, logos is logic. So that's anything that is logical. If you look at the root word, it means logic. Ethos is credibility. And what I tell students, the best way to remember ethos when you're writing and credibility is to think about Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal is a celebrity spokesperson. He's on television with commercials all the time. And I know that we live in a streaming society where all sorts of TVs and television channels don't have commercials. However, Shaquille O'Neal is known as a celebrity spokesperson. If he tries to sell me Icy Hot, it gives him credibility because he was a professional basketball player. And I think that's also really important. You have to think about that. You also need to think too about credibility when you see advertisements for medications out there or for toothpaste or everyday products. When they say 1 in 5 dentists recommends, that's logic. That has numbers, that has statistics. So ethos is credibility, logos is logic, with numbers, facts, and statistics. And pathos, well, pathos is my absolute favorite because pathos is the emotional appeal. Ever seen those commercials with the puppies and the ASPCA or the St. Jude Children's Hospital commercials where they say, if you don't donate to us, then this will happen or this will happen, with the puppy dogs, the crying little puppy dogs, and they play that sad music. That's pathos. That is all emotional appeal. It tugs on your heartstrings and your emotions, and really gets you thinking about the issue that you're talking about. So I think that's really, really important to know and understand. Again, like I said, here's a definition. I just went over them. A well-supported argument develops a balance among all three of those: logos, pathos, and ethos. So you'll have all of those things. Does your argument make sense? So logos has percentage of cancer patients currently using marijuana for pain management if you're talking about legalizing medical marijuana. So you have all of those. It strengthens your position. Using terms like many, generally, some, and typically makes your claim more effective because you recognize that absolute statements like always, never, and all do not always work. Those are what's known as fallacies because they are making an absolute fact. All people, everyone. That's not the case. Use many, generally, some, and typically because it really helps make your claim more effective. Qualifying statements really help you avoid reiterating stereotypes and making fallacious arguments. Again, like I said, logical fallacies. And like I told you before, earlier in the video, address your opposition. If you do not address your opposition, your claim becomes weakened. You're fully informed about your topic. You can approach different perspectives and claims about the topic and recognize the value in the opposing viewpoints, while at the same time discussing your claim's value and legitimacy. Arguments are often more complicated than just wrong or right position. Not everybody is going to agree with what you're saying. So the answer is, when you're asking yourself, should I cite this? Should I not cite this? The answer is always cite, no matter what. Always cite in text and on the works cited page. Week 7, after we come back from spring break, I'll talk to you more about citations. Right now, the biggest thing I want you to focus on is rhetorical appeals, viewing the advertisements that I have posted for week 6, responding to your discussion board, and beginning to think about what you're going to write about for your argumentative paper. So that's it for the argument side. And so I'm going to go back to content for you and go over just a couple things more. And then I'm also going to show you the umbrella, if I can find it here on my, there it is. So this is what I tell students to use when they're beginning to develop their essay. So you would put your argument idea here, and then your supporting ideas and your subtopics here. And this is an illustration of the central idea umbrella. So it will help you begin to develop your thesis statement. So I always recommend filling this out. You can print it out, our school library at the college. You can print papers there. If you have a printer at home, you can print that out. If not, then you can just save a copy to your computer and type on it. It has the ability for you to type on. So you have that as well, and a couple of more graphic organizer arguments that you will see. That one I just haven't uploaded yet. This is your task. Now, remember, this is not due for a few weeks, but just so you know, you're going to write a well-developed 2-page argument essay. The choice of what to argue is your decision. I have ideas for arguments under the content area to help you generate ideas. You can decide what kind of argumentative essay you want to write. You could write a definition argument, a cause and effect argument, a proposal, or an ethical argument. There's a types of argument chart that you may use for reference listed under content as well. Your audience is an educated individual who wants to know more about the topic. They're having trouble making up their mind on the topic, and they're reading your work to get a little bit more information. So this is, these are some examples. Again, it's a formal academic paper, so it will need to have formal academic tone and style. Therefore, there won't be any yous in there, no second person pronouns, no first person pronouns. And typically, we don't like to see contractions in academic writings. So this will be MLA formatted, and also each writing assignment for this class has to be your original work. So if you have taken this class before and not been successful, you need to make sure that you are not using a paper that you have previously written, because that constitutes self-plagiarism. So I always have that warning there on the assignment sheets. So that's your task. There's the rhetorical appeals video. I have graphic organizers for you. And then here's the ads. There's a Pepsi ad, a McDonald's ad, a smoking ad, and a Weight Watchers ad. You're going to need to view the ads and then respond to the discussion post. All of this will be in a list for you under week 6 that you will be able to see. And then your grammar practice is located under assignments, under Dropbox. And I'm just going to click on that and go to here. And it will be all the way here at the bottom where it says week 6 grammar practice, clarity and cohesion. You'll click on that and complete the assignment. You'll see I have some grading to do. That'll be done as well. Assessments, you do have a quiz, and the quiz is on rhetorical appeals. That is due on March 27th. Because of spring break. So I can actually, yeah, because of spring break. It's because of spring break. So you have an extra week to do several of your assignments. And then I'm going to go to Dropbox here. And if you'll look and see, the rough thesis and introduction is due on March 20th. It is available on March 13th. If you want it to be available sooner than that, just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to open it up for you. But you've got a couple of weeks to begin thinking about what you're going to write about. And this paper will go through a few revisions as well. So, just begin to think about that. So as far as your assignments this week, you're going to do the grammar practice. You have the discussion board. And then you need to decide what you're going to write about. So just to click on argument topics, this is a procon.org, and procon.org has lots of different areas. You have society, you have education, there's new copies or new topics there. There's government, science and technology, and elections and presidents. It has really just about everything on there, and it's procon.org. And so this will help give you some ideas about what you want to argue. I am absolutely not going to tell you what to write about. If you cannot find a topic to write about, I need for you to please reach out to me. I will be leaving for New York City on the 17th of March, and I won't return until the 21st of March. So if you need to email me, you can. I can't guarantee I'll get back to you right away because I'll be out of town. But if you have any questions, just shoot me an email, send me a text, and I'll be happy to assist you. I hope that this week hasn't been too overwhelming. I know it can be at times, but you will have the option to stop the video, replay the video, and go over anything you need to. And then there's also my email and office hours if you have any questions. I hope you guys have a great spring break and week off, and just make sure to get your assignments that are due in as soon as possible. And again, it's been a pleasure this week. I hope that I've helped you understand thesis statements a little bit more. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much and enjoy your spring break.